Hello and welcome to Mythic Mind, where we pursue wisdom on the paths between primary and secondary worlds. I'm Dr. Andrew Snyder, and I'm glad that you're here. Hello and welcome back as we continue through Life, Death, and Meaning with Beowulf and Boethius. This time we are continuing with Boethius' The Consolation of Philosophy with books 2 and 3. I hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome back as we discuss books 2 and 3 of the Consolation of Philosophy. In book 1, Lady Philosophy gave her initial diagnosis of Boethius' condition, namely that he had forgotten what it means to be human, and really everything else flows out from there, because she also says that he's forgotten what makes for true happiness. In other words, what is the end, the telos, the goal of human existence. And also he's forgotten what constitutes true power. And so he's struck with this biblical lamentation that it seems like the wicked tend to prosper and the righteous tend to suffer. So Lady Philosophy says that he's forgotten what it really means to have power, what it even really means to suffer as a human in the truest sense. And so we find that instead of anchoring his identity in the unmoving goodness of God, he had instead tethered himself to the spinning wheel of fortune, which may seem to work out for a time, but it necessarily is going to end up in a state of despair as you become, or rather as you mistake, becoming for being, the temporal for the eternal, which means that even the good times on fortune's wheel are actually, or they can be a kind of despair if that is where you are living in the most fundamental sense. And that's because you're not living in harmony with the unchanging nature and purpose of human existence in relation to the divine, in relation to the beatific vision of who God is. And as philosophy says, nothing that falls has ever truly been secure. In Book 2, philosophy is going to focus on the deceitfulness of fortune, in which Boethius had trusted, and in Book 3, she's going to focus on the idea of happiness, cataloging the various illusions of happiness that we tend to pursue, and she's going to start to direct us toward true happiness. Now, in this presentation, I don't give as much focus on Book 3, not at all because it's not important, but because much of that chapter, in surveying false forms of happiness, mirrors the examples of fortune's deceitfulness in Book 2. And so I don't even know that book, in light of what we see in Book 2, I don't know that Book 3 needs a whole lot of explication, more so than it needs introspection and reflection, which I think is better done just by you meeting with the spirit of the text yourself. But for now, let's go ahead and get started with Book 2. If I have fully diagnosed the cause and nature of your condition, you are wasting away in pining and longing for your former good fortune. It is the loss of this which, as your imagination works upon you, has so corrupted your mind. I know the many disguises of that monster fortune, and the extent to which she seduces with friendship the very people she is striving to cheat, until she overwhelms them with unbearable grief at the suddenness of her desertion. If you recall to mind her character, her methods, and the kind of favor she proffers, you will see that in her you did not have, and did not lose, anything of value. This is a point that philosophy is really going to drive in throughout this chapter. Boethius, and of course we do this as well, but Boethius had learned to base his identity, his most basic value system, and his place in the world on the spinning wheel of fortune. And when the wheel spun downward, he thought that he had lost something that he once possessed. But philosophy does not allow him to play the victim, as if anything of real value had truly been taken away. Remember from Book 1, when she tells Boethius that if he had truly been exiled from his true home, he was the one who made that happen. No one can do harm to a good man, a man who is founded on unmoving wisdom, because, unmoving wisdom, or rather, unmoving beatitude, it doesn't move, and so you can't lose it. at least not through any external cause. And so if you move away from beatitude, it's because you are the one who moved away. It has stayed still. And so Boethius mistakenly thought that he was in this current condition because something had been taken away from him. But that isn't the case at all, at least in the most important sense. He may have lost external goods, but they were only ever just that, external, meaning they did not truly belong to him, but they were simply lent to him for a time, and then they were recalled. And in this recalling, Fortune was simply being herself. She gives and she takes away. Often without apparent reason as far as our perspective is concerned. As Lady Philosophy goes on to say, "But you are wrong if you think Fortune has changed toward you. Change is her normal behavior, her true nature. In the very act of changing, she has preserved her own particular kind of constancy toward you. Do you really hold dear that kind of happiness which is destined to pass away? Do you really value the presence of Fortune when you cannot trust her to stay, and when her departure will plunge you in sorrow? Fortune's very mutability deprives her threats of their terror, and her enticements of their allure." And then Philosophy goes on to say, using the voice of Fortune, that inconstancy is my very essence. It is the game I never cease to play, as I turn my wheel in its ever-changing circle, filled with joy as I bring the top to the bottom, and the bottom to the top. Yes, rise on my wheel if you like, but don't count it an injury, when by the same token you begin to fall, as the rules of the game require. In pointing out the inconstancy of Fortune, Philosophy is obviously nudging us toward the recognition that true happiness, true human good, is not found in the world of becoming, but that it's rather in the world of being. And this is an idea that Boethius can find both in his Christian tradition as well as in classical philosophy, and especially in the Platonists. Remember that for Plato, by default, we live in a world of shadows, of particular things that are always in flux. We live in a world of fleeting and obscured truths that are only ever that. Even at their best, they are but partial reminders of a higher reality. But that we are capable of increasingly approximating that higher reality, the unmoving world of the forms or the ideals, which is a more real layer of reality that stands above where we tend to live. And in this higher realm of the forms, this is where we find perfect justice, justice itself, love itself, human nature itself, the way things are when they are fully what they are meant to be, when they are fully themselves without flaw. And in moving toward this world of the forms, we are ultimately moving in the direction of God, or the good. And the congruency of such a model with Christian teaching is one of the reasons why Augustine said that of all pagan philosophies, the Platonism comes the closest to Christianity. Well, operating in this Christian Platonic tradition, Boethius, through Lady Philosophy, wants us to recognize that our true good is not to be found in this world of changing fortune, of shifting shadows, but that we are instead to continually live our lives in contemplation of goodness itself, which shines forth in every fiber of existence. While it is true that all particular good things in this world are only obscure representations of goodness, the goodness that is present is good. In other words, things, and certainly people, may be corrupted, but that only means that they are not fully good. However, the good that is present is itself fully good. And so you can think of something, and any existent thing, being some kind of combination of being and nothingness. Now, with that phrasing, for at least some of you, that might point you in a Star Trean direction, most certainly not where I'm going, but it's still true here, that any existing thing is a combination of being and nothingness. Well, the being that is present is indeed being, and so too, the good that is present, even in a corrupted world, that good is still itself good, and so there is abundant, true, genuine goodness to be found wherever we look. Now, we just have to be able to disentangle that mixture and to see the good that shines forth through all of being. And so the point here is that real happiness, real goodness is available to all people at all times, because the light of beatitude can be found through the prioritization of the soul. And for more on that, if you haven't already, make sure you look at my the last video that covers Neoplatonism as it was adopted into Christianity, and that'll shed some light on what I mean by that. If happiness is the highest good of rational nature, and anything that can be taken away is not the highest good, since it can be surpassed by what can't be taken away, fortune, by her very mutability, can't hope to lead to happiness. Here we have a kind of ontological argument for a perfect happiness that is kind of related to the way that Anselm of Canterbury famously argues for the existence of God with his ontological argument, saying that God is the highest possible good, and something that necessarily exists is better than something that possibly exists, therefore God necessarily exists. Now, that's really a shorthand argument that does not do Anselm justice. But for now, I just want to demonstrate that there's a kind of methodological parallel here in these arguments, as Boethius says that a happiness that is stable is better than a happiness that is given over to change, so true happiness must be stable, and consequently, it, by definition, cannot be found in the wheel of fortune, which is intrinsically mutable, given over to change. And now, with this thesis presented, we're going to quickly survey some of the counterfeit forms of happiness that we tend to pursue through fortune. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on any of these because I really do think that they're better served by your own reflection and introspection than by great analysis and explication. I think that the heart of what we're being shown here very much is on the surface for those who are willing to engage with it. And so, when a being endowed with a godlike quality in virtue of his rational nature thinks that his only splendor lies in the possession of inanimate goods, it is the overthrow of the natural order. Other creatures are content with what is their own, but you, whose mind is made in the image of God, seek to adorn your superior nature with inferior objects, oblivious to the great wrong you do your Creator. We, who are made for the heavenly, tend to adorn ourselves with the earthly. And to be clear, I don't believe that Boethius is telling us that we all need to live in poverty. Maybe that is the lot for some of us, just as wealth may be the lot for some of us. His whole point is that we do not define ourselves by changing circumstance. And so he's not preaching a prosperity gospel, and he's not preaching a poverty gospel. He's saying that our soul, it needs to be fixed on its purpose of reflecting its Creator, regardless of what circumstance might look like for us at any given time or for any length of time. We should not seek our identity in fleeting material goods and fleeting circumstances. And philosophy says on this point that, indeed, the condition of human nature is just this. Man towers above the rest of creation so long as he recognizes his own nature, and when he forgets it, he sinks lower than the beasts. The glory of human nature is that we are made in the image of God. But when we forsake this glory and live according to beastly instincts and motivations, we are taking the downward path. We are falling from heaven like lightning. We imitate the fall of Satan from glory to dust, and thereby we become something worse than the animals. We become something truly diabolical and given over to the despair of nothingness as we move away from the font of all being. And so, material goods are not going to give us the happiness that we're looking for. Next, we have the allure of power, the thought that having power over other men is going to give us real strength and real happiness. And this also counteracts his earlier complaint that the wicked tend to prosper in seats of power, while the righteous suffer in poverty and apparent insignificance. And so it's going to respond to that as well. Lady Philosophy says that the only way one man can exercise power over another is over his body, and what is inferior to it, his possessions. You cannot impose anything on a free mind, and you cannot move from its state of inner tranquility a mind at peace with itself and firmly founded on reason. Men can only ever exercise power over external goods, but because the true goods of human existence are internal, and indeed eternal, they can never be taken away through the power of another by people living in the world of change. These true goods of the human soul can only ever be surrendered by he who is the intrinsic possessor of these goods. As Socrates says, you cannot do harm to a good man. She also mentions that even in terms of fleeting fortune, he still has much for which he should be grateful, such as the memories of good fortune, of past goods, and the fact that his family is still doing well. The thing is that as long as you exist, there is good fortune to be found, things, even temporary things, that you can be grateful for. Things are better than they could be. And anything better than the worst is cause for gratitude, recognizing that nothing is to be taken for granted. As it's written in the Havamal of the Norse Poetic Edda, no man is completely wretched, even if he has bad luck. One man is blessed with sons, another with kinsmen, another has enough money, another feels good from his deeds. And so it doesn't matter what your lot is, there are always things for which you can be grateful. And that might sound trite coming from someone like me. I mean, I've known some suffering, and some of you know a little bit of what that looks like. And I'm sure that everybody who's watching this now or listening to this now also has their own suffering that they've dealt with, and certainly suffering they will deal with. That being said, it can sound rather trite coming simply from me in the comfort of my home with my recording products here, saying that there's always something to be grateful for. But keep in mind, that's not really me saying this. This is Boethius, a man who's had the majority of his earthly fortune stripped away, a man who is now imprisoned and awaiting his execution. And so when somebody like that says we always have something to be grateful for, that's not trite at all. And in fact, it rips away any of our excuses for ingratitude, any of our excuses for despair. And so this is pretty profound given its source. Well, next he talks about looking for happiness in the prestige of political office, which is also a critique on worldly understandings of power. And so she says, "But riches are unable to quench the insatiable greed. Power does not make a man master of himself if he is imprisoned by the indissoluble chains of wicked lust. And when high office is bestowed on unworthy men, so far from making them worthy, it only betrays them and reveals their unworthiness." And when high office is bestowed on unworthy men, so far from making them worthy, it only betrays them and reveals their unworthiness. And if that is not evident from our own politicians, and I mean the thing is that this is generally going to be the case, it is generally true that those who most desire political power, those who most desire positions of prestige and honor, are those who are going to be least fit to occupy that position well. And I think that we see this on a regular basis. And of course, this is not unique to our current modern political situation, as politicians have always been, well, politicians. He also talks about the attempt to find happiness, or to find identity, fulfillment, in the nobility of name, of family, of legacy, of kin. But this gets cut down rather poignantly, as we're told that if there is anything good in nobility, I think it is only this, that there is a necessary condition imposed upon the noble not to fall short of the virtue of their ancestors. The nobility of your ancestors does not convey virtue upon you, but rather it gives you the responsibility of rising to the standard that has been raised. If members of your line have done great things, well, you should join their company, not use stolen valor as fig leaves to cover your shortcomings. And by the way, to the point that high office tends to make bad men worse, I think it's worth taking a look at verse 6 of Book 2 here, which talks about Nero. "We know that ruin Nero wrought, when Rome was fired and great men killed, by brother's hand is brother slain, he dripped with blood from his mother spilled. A practised eye o'er the corpse he rolled, with never a tear to wet his cheek, cool connoisseur of beauty cold. The empire that he held in sway extended then from eastern dawn to where the sun sinks at close of day, its northern march when two bears stand, its southern bounds where the parched south wind burns and bakes the arid sand. Could this high power stretched east and west check Nero's frenzied lunacy, too often fate by all abhorred, to savage poison adds the sword." After making her supporting points regarding the deceitfulness of fortune, she reiterates her thesis in a way that's going to lead us more directly into the conversation of happiness, as she says that good fortune always seems to bring happiness, but deceives you with her smile, whereas bad fortune is always truthful, because by change she shows her fickleness. Good fortune deceives, but bad fortune enlightens. So, bad fortune enlightens, she says. And that's because bad fortune, which generally entails the removal of good fortune, the taking away, the act of change, well, this teaches us that fortune does just that. She changes. She is mutable. This is not a secure place to cast your anchor. Because the things of this world are given to change, philosophy also says that it is the nature of human affairs to be fraught with anxiety. They never prosper perfectly, and they never remain constant. Well, this anxiety, has the potential to be a good thing if we relate to it well. Now, influenced by the current state of empirical psychology, we tend to view anxiety as an intrinsic evil that we ought to mitigate or eliminate altogether if possible. But that's because modern empirical psychology, well, it's empirical. It tends to view the human in materialistic terms. And so if something is not materially desirable, then it must be bad, right? We always want to mitigate discomfort and heighten comfort. Well, I'm not convinced that this is the best approach. I think that Soren Kierkegaard does well with anxiety, as he argues that it's not principally the fear of this or that concrete thing, but that anxiety is rather, it's a fear of potential. It's a fear of kind of our responsibility to place ourselves in the proper context. It's a fear of kind of who we are now and what we might become. We might think that we are anxious about a test score or something in a relationship or whatever else, but ultimately, these apparent objects of anxiety are really directing us to consider who we are, where we are, what our makeup truly is as individual humans. This is why Kierkegaard says that if you ask yourself why you're anxious about anything, and you ask enough follow-up questions, eventually you come to recognize that you are principally anxious about death. Death being the reality that wipes out all of your temporally bound pursuits. And so ultimately, anxiety is pointing you toward nothingness, or the other side, it can actually be used to lead you to become more grounded in substance, to become something more real, so you can build your life on something that death is not going to sweep away. And so, in other words, anxiety is an indicator of our instability. Kierkegaard says that we could plunge into this ambiguity, this instability, and we fall into a state of despair in which we lose ourselves altogether. Or, in a positive direction, we can use this anxiety as a call to find stability, where it can be found, in willful embrace of the God in whose image we are made. I believe that this is a very Boethian idea that supports my premise that there is a strong kinship between the Consolation of Philosophy and Kierkegaard's psychological text. For example, in The Concept of Anxiety, Kierkegaard says that the one who has learned to become properly related to anxiety allows anxiety to enter into his soul and to search out everything and to anxiously torment everything finite and petty out of him. And then, at that point, after you've entered into that kind of torment that disconnects you from your hyperfixation, from trying to ground your identity on temporal things, well, at that point, anxiety really becomes your servant, and it leads you to where you want to go, toward the fulfillment of human existence. And so in our awareness of our instability, we can actually make the decision for stability. And Kierkegaard goes on to say that with the help of faith, anxiety brings up the individuality to rest in providence. It is clear, therefore, that happiness is a state made perfect by the presence of everything that is good, a state which, as we said, all mortal men are striving to reach, though by different paths. For the desire for true good is planted by nature in the minds of men, only error leads them astray toward false good. This is a very Greek idea, a very Platonic idea, that everyone by nature seeks the good, but the problem is that we often stop too soon in our seeking, and we end up valuing lesser goods as if they were higher, or even ultimate. The idea of the good is implanted on our souls, but our corrupted inward vision tends to lose sight of the reality that we know, even as Paul says in Romans 1, that all people have knowledge of God, but tend to suppress that knowledge in unrighteousness. In both frameworks, we are without excuse for our apparent ignorance, because all ignorance is willful in the end. Why else unaided can man answer true, unless deep in the heart the touchwood burns, and if the muse of Plato speaks the truth, man but recalls what once he knew and lost. And so how do we recover what we lost? Well, grant, Father, that our minds thy august seat may scan. Grant us the sight of true good source, and grant us light, that we may fix on thee our mind's unblinded eye. Disperse the clouds of earthly matter's cloying weight. Shine out in all thy glory, for thou art rest and peace. To those who worship thee, to see thee is our end, who art our source and maker, Lord and path and goal. For either all things are inclined to know one thing and will wander about aimlessly as though destitute of any head or helmsman to guide them, or if there is something to which all things are inclined, it will be the sum of all good. Now, again, it's all in Plato. In his Socratic dialogue, the Euthyphro, Socrates is outside the courthouse talking with Euthyphro, whom Socrates learns is charging his own father with murder for killing one of their servants. And given the stakes here, Socrates says that Euthyphro is clearly an expert on piety, and so he asks the question, what is goodness? What is the good? And after some false starts, he clarifies the question, and he basically asks, what is the good that makes good things good? And we can identify all kinds of behaviors as good. It's good to pursue justice, it's good to practice charity, it's good to have integrity, it's good to be loyal to your friends, and so forth. But what do we actually mean by good? What is the good that stands above and beyond any of these particular instantiations of goodness that all of these things participate in? Well, according to Plato, as well as Boethius, following this question leads us to an ultimate single source of goodness, that which makes good things good. And whatever this is, it's going to be the top level, it's going to be the unifying principle that stands at the top of the hierarchy of being. This is what's the top of the great chain of being. This is the white light on the other side of the prism, which we try to approximate by tracing the various rays of color that we perceive back to their common source. According to Boethius, of course, this is God. So if we want happiness, we want true happiness, stable goodness, if we want unity of soul, we must find ourselves in the presence of this ultimate place of unity. As Kierkegaard says, purity of heart is to will one thing, and the only really one thing is God. He is the only truly simple reality. And then, of course, as it's written in the Psalms, in your light we do see light. And so, for all perfect things are obviously superior to those that are imperfect. Therefore, to avoid an unending argument, it must be admitted that the supreme God is to the highest degree filled with supreme and perfect goodness. But we've agreed that perfect good is true happiness, so that it follows that true happiness is to be found in the supreme God. And with this, we are set up for Book 4. But I want to end by reading the final verse of Book 3. Happy the man whose eyes once could perceive the shining fount of good. Happy he whose unchecked mind could leave the chains of earth behind. Once when Orpheus sad did mourn for his wife beyond death's bourne, his tearful melody begun, made the moveless trees to run, made the rivers halt their flow, made the lion hind's fell foe, side by side with her to go, made the hare accept the hound, subdued now by the music's sound, but his passions unrepressed burned more fiercely in his breast, though his song all things subdued, it could not calm his master's mood, complaining of the gods above, down to hell he went for love. There on sweetly sounding strings, songs that soothe he plays and sings, all the droughts once drawn of song, from the springs the muses throng, all the strength of helpless grief, and of love which doubled grief, give their weight then to his weeping, as he stands the Lord's beseeching. Of the underworlds for grace, the triform porter stands amazed, by Orpheus' singing tamed and dazed. The Furies who avenge men's sin, who at the guilty's terrors grin, let tears of sorrow from them steal, no longer does the turning wheel. Ixen's head sent whirling round, old Tantalus upon the sound, forgets the waters and his thirst, and when the music is rehearsed, the vulture seizes flesh to shred, at the last monarch of the dead. In tearful voice, we yield, he said, let him take with him his wife, by song redeemed and brought to life, but let him to this law obey, look not on her by the way, until from night she reaches day. But who to love can give a law? Love unto love itself is law. Alas, close to the bounds of night, Orpheus backwards turned his sight, and looking lost her twice to fate. For you the legend I relate, you who see the upward way, to lift your mind into the day. For who gives in and turns his eye back to darkness from the sky, loses while he looks below, all that up with him may go. And so, why does Boethius end Book 3 with a recitation of the story of Orpheus? Well, because Orpheus, he has to go to hell. He has to go to the underworld. He has to be brought low. He has to die to all earthly ambitions. Once he willingly enters into the place of death, once he despairs of what this world has to offer, and he goes into the state of despair with the goal of redeeming his love, well, he is able to do that so long as he no longer looks down, but continually looks up. He has to continually look toward the land of the living. Because yes, we do need to descend into the world of the dying, right? I mean, if you're coming out of the C.S. Lewis course, that you have to go to the place of dead in order to get the beauty that makes Ungut beautiful. But you can't stay there in the place of the dead. You can't look back on Sodom and Gomorrah. You can't look back. You have to ever look forward in the direction of life, in the direction of righteousness, in the way that you are being called. And if you don't fix your eyes on where you're going, then you may find out that you end up losing your love. You end up losing beatitude. You end up losing that which you are chiefly seeking. And so yes, go to the underworld, but don't stay there. Keep your eyes on the land of the living. Keep your eyes on truth, goodness, and beauty. Keep your eyes on the happiness that comes only through the beatific vision of the glory of God. And until next time, Godspeed. Alright, thank you for listening to the Mythic Mind podcast or watching over on YouTube. As a reminder, both of those options are available to you, and you can find information about the other platform in the show notes. If you enjoyed this presentation, you're enjoying this series, you enjoy the various things that Mythic Mind is doing, then I do welcome your support over on patreon.com/mythicmind. Not only would even just a little bit of monthly support help me to invest even more time in expanding the breadth as well as the depth of what we're doing here at Mythic Mind, but also you get some access to the inner circle here. And so you get, for any level of support, you get all 3 Mythic Mind podcasts delivered early and ad-free into a single feed. That's Mythic Mind Movies and Shows, and Mythic Mind Games. And also, any level of support allows you to join the recorded conversations for any of those shows. And then, of course, higher levels of support will provide additional tiers, but any level of support is helpful and gives you those things that I just mentioned. And I would like to thank all of my Tier 3 patrons by name, so many thanks to Zeta, Zach E, Zach K, William, Tyler, Ross, Roger, Paul, Michael, Kyle, Kit, Justin, Jamie, Jack, Adam, Evie, Don, David W, David R, Christopher, Chase, Andrew, Amanda, and Aaron. You all just do so much in helping me continue the movement of Mythic Mind, and I would love to see more of you join the ranks. But even if you don't do that, you can, of course, show support by leaving me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and wherever else you can do that. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to all 3 Mythic Mind podcasts. That is this one, Mythic Mind, Mythic Mind Movies and Shows, and Mythic Mind Games. The next thing to come out from Mythic Mind will be on Thursday as we continue through Josh Traylor's Paradise Lost course. And then on Friday, we will be having our conversation over on Mythic Mind Games on Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2 with Michael Caine and Master Samwise. But that is it for now. I will talk to you next time.